Hi folks, Rob Ager here, and it's time for a little bit of a rant. This was prompted by me watching the latest Star Trek film. I think it was the latest one anyway. This is the second time I've seen this movie. I watched it about maybe 3 or 4 nights ago. When I first saw it, I kind of liked it. I mean, I didn't mind the new Star Trek films. I'm not a big fan of J.J. Abrams' style of visual direction. I find it too disorienting. But I thought I'd rewatch this one because I'd been watching the original first Star Trek movie, which is one of my favourite sci-fi movies of all time. I'd rewatched that a couple of times the week before because, I mean, I don't even consider that to be a Star Trek film. Its concepts are so high level. I consider it to be, a side on its own. But I've been going through some of the other Star Trek movies. I'm not a huge Trekkie, but I enjoy quite a few of the movies. And it really brought to my attention something that I'd been thinking about this for quite a while. It'd been on my mind regarding a number of different contexts, but watching Star Trek From Beyond really brought it to the surface. And it's what I took some notes while I was watching the movie, and I wrote down this title: CGI and the Denial of Reality. Now, the reasons for that title will gradually become apparent, hopefully, as I go through my notes here. This is a very unplanned rant, so I might be bouncing back and forth between different subjects. Okay, so what do I mean by CGI and the denial of reality? Well, more and more aspects of our lives, especially the news media, the movies, video games, any kind of media, is becoming increasingly dominated by artificial visual content. Computer-generated imagery. There seems to be a very gradual shift towards avoiding actually filming the real world, as if there's something not right about the real world. We don't want reality. We don't want the flaws, the unbelievable visual complexity, all the warts that go with the visual world, the real visual world. No, we want to replace that with CGI in as many contexts as we can. And I consider CGI to basically be just an advanced cartoon. It's just a cartoon that is more driven by mathematical formulas. It's a cartoon that has a great deal more texture. CGI basically tries to take cartoon animation and make it look as close to the real world as possible, but not quite. This is where it gets interesting. All this CGI imagery, it's not actually trying to imitate the real world. It's trying to give us the conscious impression that it's real, but it's also trying to distort the real world to remove a lot of the dirt and grime and flaws that exist in the real world, so that we have this new artificial visual reality, computer-generated in many different media, that on a surface glance looks like the real world, and you think, oh yeah, this looks really real. And if you're not even told it's CGI, you might think it's real. But at the same time, it's trying to take visual reality and turn it into something that is much slicker, much smoother, and less flawed. Okay, so let's get into some more notes on this. Okay, so I've wrote here, a lot of people now think that things are bad if they're not CGI. And yeah, I've definitely been seeing a lot of this, particularly with a lot of younger people as well. If they watch a movie or a TV show or something, and it doesn't have this artificial, overly slick, fake, cartoonish visual depiction of reality. If they watch a movie or a TV show and it looks like the real world, and it looks like everything that you actually see was actually filmed with a real camera, everything was filmed in front of the camera, everything was in camera, and none of it was done in post-production. A lot of people now look down on that. It's like they think, oh, that's cheap, or that's lazy, or that's, ironically, that's artificial. Their idea of good quality visual content is that it has to be computer generated, overly slick, incredibly well lit. Everything has to look all slick and perfect and nice and not too chaotic. Whereas when you actually film the real world, things are chaotic. And a lot of people don't like that. And I think there's a general denial thing that's been going on across the board. I mean, denial has always been a part of human nature, and it always will be. But I've been noticing that denial is a big thing that's going on in the world across many contexts today. It seems to be getting worse and worse. And I've actually been coming to the conclusion in recent years that denial is probably the biggest, most fundamental and most dangerous flaw in the human psyche. The desire to reject real things that are happening, to reject the evidence of those things, and to try and replace them with an oversimplified, slicker, more user-friendly, less painful interpretation of reality. That happens all across the board in many contexts. And I actually think of this as being a regression of the human psyche across the board for a lot of people. It's part of a general regression that's been going on, where people are becoming less adult and are becoming more like toddlers. They're becoming more infantile, more childlike. They want constant, instant gratification of an artificial nature. In the same way that kids will watch cartoons that have the most simplified animation. And part of the reason that appeals to kids is because the real visual world is incredibly complex and very dirty and dangerous, I suppose. You see a brick wall in the street and it might have moss and dirt on it. It might have little bits of glass or some loose nails sticking out of it or something like that. A brick wall in the real world can be very ugh. But in a cartoon reality, a brick wall will just be red rectangles placed against white and no other visual flaws. And so I think young kids love the simplicity of cartoons, the visual simplicity, because their brains are slowly developing the ability to deal with the complex world, not just visually, but in terms of the complex dynamics of how people communicate, and the incredibly complex things that contribute to the fact that they're able to eat food and sleep in a warm house and things like that. Kids like to have an extremely simple reality that can be summed up in the most simple words. That's if the kids even want to use words. And that translates to the visual form of cartoons. And so with this preoccupation with CGI, which is another form of this childish oversimplification of reality, this distortion of the actual real world into something that is false, I think it's part of a general age regression that's going on. For some reason, a lot of people are becoming much more infantile. Now, perhaps part of this is that maybe it's not that society is going that way now. Maybe it always was like that. It's just that in the past, going back 30 years or beyond, the technology was not available to create this artificial reality. I mean, they used to paint pictures. They create these big sprawling paintings of things, and within those paintings, this incredible skill would go into it, just like incredible skill goes into CGI. But if you look at old paintings from hundreds of years ago, those paintings aren't really a depiction of the actual reality that went on at the time. Usually they're not, especially when the art is paid for by some rich family, and it's like, oh, I want to have a picture of me posing and smiling and looking all regal and superior and stuff like that. And the artist would have to manipulate the details of the painting to make the subject look different to the reality of who they are. So I think that's always gone on. I think if the technology for CGI was available hundreds of years ago, it would have led to the same artificial reality preference that is going on now. And so it seems to be an issue. I'm not necessarily saying that the technology in itself is bad. It's got a lot of good uses. Technology isn't the problem. It's people's tendency to have this preference for an artificial reality, this preference to deny harsh reality on all kinds of different levels, But specifically, I think this CGI thing is a great visual example of it. So I've wrote here, good visual communication is about communicating meaning. I mean, there are a lot of movies that have been made that have these incredibly slick visuals, really precise visuals that don't necessarily look like the real world. For example, Blade Runner or Apocalypse Now, both of those movies have an incredibly slick visual style. But those movies, the details are full of meaning. If you're going to have a distorting visual reality of incredible visual beauty that looks more beautiful than the real world does, if you're going to do that, then try to infuse a lot of meaning into the details. Because if you don't do that, then it just becomes distracting eye candy. And I've wrote here that textured cartoon visuals, CGI, have come to override narrative so much that it destroys narrative by being a constant distraction. And this was the thing I was having when I was watching Star Trek From Beyond a few nights ago. The new Star Trek movies, the scripts aren't anything groundbreaking at all, but I find them kind of enjoyable. There's a bit of humour in there. The Beverly Hills 90210 style actors, they're okay. They're fun to watch. But there's this thing where I couldn't watch Star Trek From Beyond properly because I kept getting distracted by constant visual attempts to turn me into an infant. It's like the camera has to be constantly swooping left, right, up, down, round and round, back and forth. It felt like the direction and the editing was constantly trying to distract me with eye candy. It's like it's trying to reduce me to a state of like a little baby just being like amused at colourful flashing lights of a toy, or lying in its crib and there's dangling flashy toys that are hanging above and it's like, it feels like that kind of visual style in movies, which is now very, very common. It's like a disguise. It's like the script, the story, the characters are completely lacking. It's just the same old boring crap we've already had. There's nothing adventurous or interesting going on there. There's no real vision to the movie, and so a mediocre script that just rehashes tropes and cliches from other classic movies, much better movies. Most scripts are like that these days. It's just a rehash of ideas from other things. There might be a couple of little original ideas thrown in there just to make it look like the movie isn't a copy of all this other stuff, but it is still basically a copy on the whole. The roller coaster of eye candy seems to be a distraction. It's like an attempt to grab the audience emotionally and keep shaking them emotionally by having the camera swooping around and lots of flashy colours. And there always has to be something visually going on in the scene that is distracting, just in case the dialogue and the acting and the story are boring in that moment. So to me, it conveys a complete lack of faith in the story and the characters from the filmmakers if they feel that they constantly have to polish every shot with lots of completely irrelevant visual flair. Because I've also wrote here that this use of CGI, overly slick, unrealistic visuals in general media, it's constantly trying to give us the same visual disorientation of being on a roller coaster or watching a firework display, or to give us that same feeling that a kid has when they're staring at a sparkler that they're holding in their hand. Yeah. Movies have become like a shallow visit to the fun fair, reflected in the overemphasis of selling candy and junk food. And yeah, I mean, that's an interesting parallel. A lot of people are aware about this. It used to be quite a long time ago, if you went to the cinema, there would be like some sort of a snack bar shop. You could buy some drinks or sweets or whatever. And now you go to the cinema and it's like fucking candy. Here's your hot dogs, here's your food, here's your drinks. There's lots of sugar and salt, and it's all surrounded by slick looking shiny walls and nice, pretty, colourful lights. And you walk into the cinema and it's like candy. It's like walking into a kid's playpen. You take the kid to the play centre and everything's all coloured blocks and stuff to play with and little toys that you press a button and it makes a crazy noise and the kid goes, ooh. It's like the cinema experience has become that. And it's been like that for a long time, but it's a really good parallel because, the term eye candy, it really does, it's not just metaphorical, it's going on literally at the level of junk food that's being sold to you as you walk into the cinema. I mean, when do you ever walk into a cinema and you see like a nice health food bar? Here's some sticks of carrot. Eat some carrots while you're watching the movie. Here's a fruit stall. You can buy something healthy like an apple or some grapes, and you can take that into the cinema and eat some healthy food while you're there. Here's a nice healthy drink full of like herbs and things and natural fruit juices. No, you walk into the cinema and it's like, get your junk food here, get your crap that is bad for your body, but it will give you an instant, immediate thrill, a rush, just like a little kid going to the candy store. And then the movie itself is the same thing. You walk in and the visuals are in your face right away. You see it with all the adverts and stuff as well, and in the movies themselves. And I've wrote here that the problem is so bad that sometimes a good story is ruined by the eye candy visuals. And yes, that was exactly what I was experiencing. It was an okay story, but yeah, I could not enjoy the film because of this. And I've wrote here that ironically sound has taken a nosedive. There's crap music in movies and very weak sound effects. And for some reason, most of the emphasis is on creating a visual cartoon illusion. Yeah, I mean, this is quite interesting. This push to get away from the real world and to get towards an artificial world, kind of akin to, the Matrix movie, really, where we're all constantly hooked up to screens and we're being fed visual eye candy, whether it's on our mobile phone, whether it's on TV sets or wherever. The emphasis is almost entirely visual, to the point where the quality of sound is going. And I think that this might be because the technological advancements that have gone on that have enabled this artificial CGI reality that we can all dip in and out of, that technology is primarily about the visual experience. There hasn't really been a lot that's happened in terms of the technology of sound. I mean, listening to a real live band in a large cavernous room, you get like a sound experience there, which is hard to reproduce at home. So we've got these incredible, these complex visuals going on our screens, and yet we've still got these tiny little speakers attached to those screens, and it's very limited in its output. And it's almost like, I mean, I'm not saying all this has been done deliberately. I think it's largely an unconscious thing that's been going, a collective unconscious thing that's been going on, where it's like the media industry has kind of gone, oh, well, we don't really know what to do with sound. I mean, tons and tons of music has been made. We don't really know how to make any new types of fabulous sound effects that haven't been heard before. We've reached a brick wall on sound and we don't know what else to do. So not only are we going to not try and progress the quality of sound in movies, video games and any other media, but we're actually going to start ignoring it and let it sort of decline in its quality because we can't be bothered with it. We don't know how to sell you anything new in terms of sound. And, the quality of new music has been absolutely terrible for at least the last 20 years. There's still occasionally good music going on, but almost everything I can hear is just a rehash of stuff that's gone before. Hardly ever come across any original music these days. I think the 1990s was probably the last good time for music. I mean, a lot of the 90s was rehashing stuff that had gone before, but it rehashed it in ways that were interesting. It took... in the 90s, genres were being taken for, 1960s and 80s music would be mixed together to create new styles. And that's what they were very much into in the 90s, was mixing pre-existing styles of music together in new and interesting ways. And that was great. A lot of great music came out of that. But to me, music has mostly been dead since then. And I think it's partially because the technology hasn't moved forward. You had all your 70s music, and then the synthesizer technology and stuff, and electronic music. The technology was becoming better and better and more interesting as you got through the 80s and into the 90s. And then it reached a plateau, and it was like, well, we don't really know what else to do with this. However, visual CGI has moved forward, and so it's like the media industry has just gone, let's go with the visual eye candy, fuck the sound, let's go with that. And the ability to create good quality sound seems to be a skill that is declining. There's a few examples of this with... when you get classic movies that are sort of, what would you call it? They are remastered for release in 4K, or even when they were just released on Blu-ray. And sometimes the sound mixes are altered and the sound mixes are made worse. But the idea is that we need to have 12 speaker surround sound capability for this Blu-ray or this 4K version of this film, but the original version of the movie might have just had a mono soundtrack, like with the Terminator. The Terminator, the original sound mix of that film was fantastic. Doesn't matter that it was mono. Who cares? That doesn't really make much difference. But when they remastered the Terminator for release on a Blu-ray and 4K and so on, they changed a lot of the sound effects. And one thing they did, and they absolutely fucked up, was they changed the gun sound effects so that the action scenes now have these piddly crap sound effects that don't sound nearly as good as the ones that Jim Cameron had put into the original cut of the film. And that same thing has happened with Scarface. I rewatched that one about a week or two ago. Scarface was brilliant. And I noticed that the remixing of the action scenes in that film, the gun sound effects, was so bad that whoever did the editing couldn't even tell the difference between different types of gun sounds. So you would have a character shooting a gun indoors in the movie Scarface, and you would hear an echo from the gun, which was clearly from a gun that was recorded shooting outside. So you get like a distant echo from the gun that you would not get when you fire that gun indoors. That's how bad the remixing of gun sounds was in the movie Scarface. And a similar thing happened with An American Werewolf in London. My favourite scene of that movie is the nightmare dream sequence in the middle of it, where a bunch of werewolf Nazis knock on the protagonist's door. He's having a dream, and they come in and they slaughter his family. It's like a World War II reenactment thing with werewolf Nazis. And fantastic scene, and they've ruined it in the updated remastered version because whoever did the sound effects had no clue about gunfire. I mean, I'm not even an expert in gunfire, and I could see the flaws there. So it'd be like 5 werewolf Nazis all firing Uzis, and it's replaced with a piddly. It's replaced with a piddly sound effect. It's like it's like, hang on, no. In the original edit, there was like 5 Uzis all being fired all at once, and it was a wall of chaotic sound. And you've replaced that with a pop gun that sounds like only one gun is firing instead of 5. That's how bad sound editing has become because of this overemphasis on visuals. I also made a quick note here on the overload of detail. A lot of movies, it's like you have to have too much going on screen at once. It's funny, this goes in both directions. You've got, I can't remember his name, the director who did Blade Runner 2049, who I think is massively overrated. He did, I think the movie Prisoners that he did was decent. But he's gone in the opposite direction. A lot of movies are obsessively trying to throw lots and lots of eye candy detail at you. Too much detail, but none of it really means anything. And he's gone in the opposite direction, and he's making his movies too simple visually, where there's hardly any detail, and a lot of it's just really boring, flat colours. And I think, in contrast to the other eye candy stuff, that gives the impression, I think his name's Denis Villeneuve or something like that, I can't remember. But I think that some people are watching these movies that have some more sort of toned down, flattened visual style that still looks completely unrealistic compared to the real world. And a lot of people assuming that it's meaningful because it doesn't have the overly complex visual detail. So it's funny that you've got it going off in both directions. So yeah, excessive preoccupation with constant movement. And this isn't just about the camera itself moving around all the time. The characters have to be doing it as well. And I think this is part of the big appeal that superhero movies were having. I hope they were having, and people are starting to move away from it. Part of the big thing with superheroes is they never stop fucking jumping around. They're always flying, jumping, smashing through windows, skating across, sliding across the floor, flipping over, doing gymnastics. It's like going to watch the Olympics. I'd rather just go and watch the Olympics, because then I know that the athletic feats that I'm seeing are actually happening by a real person. And yet, the obsession with parkour jumping has ruined action movies as well. You watch these movies where a guy always has to jump in the air, and as he's jumping in the air in slow motion, he has to be firing two guns at once, and he's somehow able to aim accurately while he's flying through the air. So you get this superhero obsession with parkour movement, which parallels the visual obsession with moving the camera all the time. And then we've got what is literally called jump scares, which a lot of people have been complaining about for years. The horror movies where there's nothing interesting going on, there's nothing really creepy or unnerving or genuinely challenging going on. But, there'll be a little period of silence, and then blah, there's suddenly something visual happens, and there'll usually be like a sudden boost in the sound of the movie. And the whole idea is just to make you go, oh, to jump in your seat, to literally make you feel like you're bouncing up and down on a roller coaster. So that's another example of it. And, it's appropriate that they call them jump scares. And a lot of these techniques are used for what I've called the over-dramatization of plot events that we've already seen 50 times before. I mean, how many times now do you watch a movie and it's like, something's happening, you're like, yeah, I've seen this in 10, 20, 30 movies before, and yet they're bombarding me with visuals and music that's supposed to make it seem like it's really dramatic. And I'm like, well, it's not really that dramatic because I've seen this so many times before. Plenty of that going on. There was another technological attempt to do this, which came in a couple of different phases, and that was 3D movies. You used to have the thing where you would go to the cinema and you had to wear those glasses, and it was like one red lens, one green lens, and you would get the 3D effect from the screen. That was a little bit of a stupid novelty thing that happened back in the day when I was a kid. And, for a while, people were like, we've got this new 3D eye candy experience. And then people got bored of it very quickly, and they stopped making those kinds of movies. And then there was an attempt to redo that with what was it, Jim Cameron's Avatar, wasn't it? It's like, let's make the 3D again and do it even better. But it didn't add anything. For the first 10 minutes of Avatar, I was like, wow, this is incredibly good 3D effects. And then 10 minutes in, I was like, will you switch off the fucking 3D effects and just let me watch the movie? I don't want 3D. Give me the normal flat screen movie. And so yeah, that 3D revolution of cinema seems to have died off. And I also added there that 3D movies try to create the illusion that we're not watching a flat screen. And this is also done with cinematography obsession with depth of field. And yeah, we've definitely had a lot of that in recent years where... particularly around 2012, 2013, there was this widespread obsession among filmmakers and the studios where you had to shake the camera all the time to give the impression of actually being there, instead of... It was kind of like to get away from the idea, you're watching a movie and the screen that you're watching it on is just stationary. It's just flat. And it's like the constant shaking of the camera seems to be an attempt to distract the viewer away from the reality that they're just watching a stationary flat screen. And it was also happening a lot with the depth of field, where every single shot in a fucking movie would have to have something that would be like deeply out of focus in the foreground, characters walking around, and there might be some leaves that are all blurred and out of focus in the foreground, or the background has to always be completely out of focus. So this obsession with always trying to create exaggerated depth of field, it looks very pretty, but again, it's distraction, and most of the time it doesn't actually do anything to serve the story or communicate anything about the characters. And it's another form of artificiality. I mean, that is the whole point of depth of field in movies, is that it tries to get us away from the reality that we're just watching a flat screen. So in the real world, when we look around with our real eyes, the world does not look like the depth of field distortion that we get in movies. When you're watching a movie, you can shift your own attention back and forth between things that are in and out of focus in the movie, and it looks very pretty. It looks very unlike the real world. I mean, the movie Predator looks fantastic in this respect. I love all of the depth of field with all of the greenery in that film. It looks fantastic, and it's very cartoonish. But again, that's another way in which movies try to get away from the visual reality of the real world, because in reality, when we look around at the real world, we hardly ever pay our conscious attention towards things that are out of our visual focus. Our conscious attention is virtually always on whatever is actually in focus in our visual field. You can force yourself to pay attention to things that are out of focus, but it is not our nature to do that. And over-editing does the same thing. This preoccupation with having to constantly cut back and forth. A lot of filmmakers are scared to just film a scene with one camera. 3 or 4 people walk into a room, they chat, they do stuff, and to just have a wide shot that is either stationary or just moves around occasionally just to keep them in shot so you can see what's happening. It's like a lot of filmmakers are terrified to do that in case the audience get bored and go, oh no, I'm not getting enough eye candy stimulation here. And so there has to be lots and lots of camera angles shot. There has to be extreme close-ups and stuff all over the place from all different angles. And then the editor has to constantly edit back and forth between all these different shots unnecessarily. And I find that destroys a lot of movies. It makes a lot of movies so that I can't follow them. It's not that I can't follow them. It's just that I'm constantly distracted. And there was a lot of complaints about this with the action scenes of the second Daniel Craig Bond movie, where it was just completely over-edited to the point where it wasn't an action scene, it was just an editing display. And so now we're getting more into the nitty-gritty stuff here towards the end of my notes. I've wrote, this is all part of a larger denial of reality trend. People feel hopeless because they don't believe in much. And it's a lot like drug addiction. Yeah? I mean, drug addicts and alcoholics, they often very much lack meaning in their life. They don't know what to do with themselves. They don't have a purpose for their life. They're like, I don't know what to do. They get up each day and it's like, what's the point of existence? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do? Nothing seems to mean anything. So I'm just going to distract myself from that feeling of emptiness with drugs, alcohol, whatever. And I think that is going on across the board with a lot of things. It seems like people's belief in anything is fading away. I mean, science has eroded the belief in religions. I'm not into institutional religion myself, but science has had the effect of destroying people's belief in that. But people don't know what else to believe in. And science itself isn't really worth believing in because it's kind of cold and empty. Science is just about ways of manipulating the physical world, basically. It doesn't really provide any more meaning or philosophical depth. It doesn't tell us how we should live our existence, what we should aim to do with our lives. Science has destroyed a lot of meaning, but it hasn't given any replacement for it. That's how I wrote the term candy culture here. I like that one, candy culture. I just thought I'd get it in there. We are living in a candy culture. And I've wrote here that the choice of actors in movies, we're often choosing actors to play roles who have artificial-looking faces, plastic-looking faces that look as if they were created by CGI. So you'll get people, if you get actors who have like a perfectly squared face with really, really smooth skin, and you often get the actors, and it's done with makeup as well. Makeup is used to mask over the perceived flaws of a person's visual face, to make them look artificial, and that's gone on for thousands of years. And you get a lot of usually women, but sometimes men as well, will wear makeup to make themselves look artificial, to make themselves look unnatural, to try and remove the idea that this is a flesh and blood human being with lots of the usual natural flaws and imperfections that go with being an organic human. And makeup disguises that. And so we tend to pick actors to star in movies who naturally have a kind of look that looks like it's computer generated. It's just a funny little thought I had there. Okay, so yeah, that's it really. I think that's the end of my notes. I can't think of anything much else to say on it all now. I have been noticing this stuff going on in loads of other contexts, and probably if you asked me next week, I'd come up with a load of more thoughts on it. So that's just a general thing about denial of reality and how it manifests in our obsession with artificial visuals across all kinds of media. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Do you have answers to any of this stuff? Any ways forward? Any more insights? Any ways of stopping people from regressing into this infantile artificial reality state and getting people to engage more with the actual real physical world? Any thoughts you have on this stuff, or whether people should even do that? I mean, should we just go into an artificial reality? Whatever your thoughts are, let me know in the comments section. You've been listening to Rob Ager. Take it easy. See you guys soon. Bye-bye.